The black Mercedes SUV roared through the muddy puddle like a beast. Water and dirt flew everywhere, covering Grace from head to toe in thick brown mud. The expensive car didn't even slow down. "Look at this dirty girl," laughed the woman inside the car, her window rolling down. Her name was Mrs. Victoria Adenuga, one of the richest women in Lagos. Gold jewelry sparkled on her neck and wrists. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup looked like it cost more than Grace's rent. Grace stood there shocked. Her cleaning uniform was now completely brown. The mop in her hand dripped with muddy water. Other people on the street stared at her and whispered, "You belong in the gutter anyway." Mrs. Victoria shouted from her car window, "Look at you. So dirty and useless." But what Mrs. Victoria didn't know was that someone very important was watching. Someone who would change everything. Let me tell you how this all started. 3 hours earlier, Grace Okafor had woken up at 4 a.m. in her small room in Mushin. The room was tiny with just one bed, a small table, and a few clothes hanging on nails in the wall. She shared this space with her younger sister, Blessing, who was still sleeping. Grace was 22 years old, but she looked older because of all the hard work she did. Every morning, she would wake up early to prepare for her cleaning job at the big office building in Victoria Island. "Grace, please don't forget my school fees," Blessing whispered as Grace got ready to leave. Grace's heart felt heavy. Her sister's school fees were due next week, and she didn't have enough money. But she smiled anyway. "Don't worry, Blessing. I will find a way," Grace said softly. Grace worked for a cleaning company called Sparkle Clean Services. Her job was to mop floors, empty trash cans, and clean windows in the tall office buildings where rich people worked. The pay was small, but it was honest work. That morning, Grace took 3 different buses to get to Victoria Island. The traffic was terrible as always in Lagos. She arrived at the big office building at 7 a.m. and started her work immediately. While Grace was working, something else was happening in the same building. On the 40th floor, in the biggest office with the best view of Lagos, sat Mr. Samuel Emeka. But nobody in the building knew who he really was. Samuel looked like a simple man. He wore normal clothes, a plain shirt and simple trousers. He carried an old briefcase and spoke quietly to everyone. The other workers thought he was just another employee. But Samuel Emeka was actually the secret owner of the entire building. In fact, he owned 12 companies in Nigeria and was worth over 2 billion naira. He was one of the richest men in the country, but he liked to keep it secret. Samuel had a special habit. Every morning he would come to work dressed like a normal person. He wanted to see how his employees really behaved when they thought no rich boss was watching. That morning, Samuel was walking down to the ground floor when he saw Grace working. She was mopping the floor very carefully, making sure every corner was clean. When someone dropped paper on the floor she had just cleaned, Grace didn't get angry. She just cleaned it again with a smile. "This girl works so hard," Samuel thought to himself. Around 10 a.m., Grace finished her work inside the building. Her supervisor, Mr. Tund, told her to go outside and clean the front entrance. "Grace, make sure the outside looks perfect. The big boss might visit today," Mr. Tund said. Grace didn't know that the big boss was already there watching her. Outside, Grace started mopping the entrance steps. The morning rain had made everything muddy and slippery. Cars drove by very fast, splashing water everywhere. Grace was almost finished when she heard the sound of a big car coming very fast. She looked up and saw the black Mercedes SUV heading straight toward a huge puddle right next to where she was standing. Time seemed to move very slowly. Grace tried to move away, but she wasn't fast enough. Splash! The muddy water hit Grace like a wave. Her clean uniform was now completely dirty. Her face, her hair, everything was covered in brown mud. The Mercedes stopped right in front of the building. The window rolled down, and out came the laughing voice of Mrs. Victoria Adenuga. "Ah, look at this dirty girl." Mrs. Victoria laughed so loudly that everyone could hear. "You look exactly where you belong, in the dirt." Grace felt tears coming to her eyes, but she didn't cry. She had learned not to cry in public because it made things worse. "I'm sorry, madam," Grace said quietly, even though it wasn't her fault. "Sorry?" Mrs. Victoria laughed even harder. "You should be sorry for existing. Look at you. So poor and dirty. This is exactly where people like you belong." Other people on the street stopped to look. Some laughed with Mrs. Victoria. Others looked sad for Grace, but nobody said anything. But high above, looking down from his office window, Samuel Emeka saw everything. His hands turned into fists. His heart began beating very fast with anger. "How dare she treat that hard-working girl like that?" Samuel whispered to himself. Samuel quickly took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, James? I need you to find out everything about a woman in a black Mercedes, license plate number ABC 123D. I also need you to find out about a young cleaning lady working downstairs. Do it now." As Mrs. Victoria drove away, still laughing, Grace stood there covered in mud. She didn't know that the most powerful man in the building had just seen everything. She didn't know that her life was about to change forever. But first, things were about to get much worse. Grace walked back into the building, still covered in mud. Her supervisor, Mr. Tund, saw her and became very angry. "Grace, what happened to you? You look terrible." Mr. Tund shouted. "How can you come into this clean building looking like that?" "Sir, a car splashed mud on me while I was working outside," Grace explained quietly. "I don't want to hear excuses. Go home and don't come back until you can look professional," Mr. Tund said loudly. Grace felt her heart break. If she went home now, she would lose half a day's pay. She needed every naira to pay for Blessing's school fees. "Please, sir, let me just clean myself up in the bathroom. I can still work," Grace begged. "No. You're embarrassing our company. Leave now." Mr. Tund pointed to the door. As Grace walked toward the exit, tears finally came to her eyes. She tried to wipe them away, but more kept coming. What Grace didn't know was that Samuel was watching everything from the security cameras in his office. He saw how Mr. Tund treated her. He saw her tears. His anger grew even stronger. Samuel picked up his phone again. "James, cancel all my meetings today. I have something very important to do." Meanwhile, Mrs. Victoria Adenuga arrived at her own office building. She owned a fashion company called Victoria's Style. She was still laughing about what happened to Grace. "Did you see that dirty girl?" she told her assistant, Jennifer. "I splashed mud all over her. She looked so funny." Jennifer didn't laugh. She felt bad for the poor girl, but she couldn't say anything because Mrs. Victoria was her boss. But Mrs. Victoria's good mood didn't last long. At exactly 11 a.m., her phone rang. "Hello, Mrs. Adenuga? This is the bank. We need to talk to you about your loan payments. They are 3 months late." Mrs. Victoria's face changed. "What? That's impossible. I always pay on time." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but our records show you owe 50 million naira. If you don't pay by next week, we will take your company." Mrs. Victoria started to panic. She had been spending too much money on expensive clothes and jewelry. She had forgotten about the loan payments. "There must be a mistake," she said, but deep down she knew it was true. At the same time, Grace was walking slowly to the bus stop. Her uniform was still dirty and people kept staring at her. She felt so ashamed. Then a black car stopped next to her. The window rolled down, and Grace was surprised to see the quiet man from the office building, Samuel. "Excuse me, are you Grace Okafor?" Samuel asked kindly. Grace was confused. How did this simple office worker know her name? "Yes, sir, but how do you?" "Please get in the car. I want to help you," Samuel said with a gentle smile. Grace was scared. Her mother had always told her never to get in cars with strangers. "I don't know you, sir. I should go home," Grace said. Samuel understood her fear. "My name is Samuel Emeka. I work in the same building as you. I saw what happened to you this morning and I want to help. But if you're not comfortable, I understand." Something about Samuel's voice made Grace feel safe. She got into the car. "Where are we going?" Grace asked. "First, let's get you some clean clothes. Then, I want to tell you something that will change your life," Samuel said. They stopped at a nice clothing store. Samuel bought Grace a beautiful new dress and told her to change in the fitting room. When Grace came out, she looked completely different. She looked beautiful. "Now, let's go somewhere we can talk," Samuel said. They went to a quiet restaurant. Grace was nervous because she had never been to such a nice place. "Grace, I need to tell you the truth about who I am," Samuel said. "I'm not just a regular office worker. I'm actually the owner of the building where you work. I own many companies in Lagos." Grace's eyes became very wide. You're rich?" Samuel smiled. "Yes, very rich. But I like to dress simply and watch how people behave when they think no boss is looking. This morning I saw how hard you work. I saw how polite you are even when people treat you badly." Grace didn't know what to say. "I also saw how that terrible woman treated you," Samuel continued. "What she did was wrong and I'm going to make sure she learns a lesson." "What do you mean?" Grace asked. Samuel smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say Mrs. Victoria Adenuga is about to have a very bad day." At that exact moment, Mrs. Victoria was in her office crying. The bank had just called again. Her company was in serious trouble. She owed money to many people and everyone wanted to be paid immediately. Then her assistant Jennifer came in with terrible news. "Ma'am, 3 of our biggest customers just canceled their orders. They said they don't want to do business with us anymore." "What? What happened?" Mrs. Victoria cried. "Someone posted a video online. It shows you splashing mud on a poor girl and laughing at her. The video is everywhere now. People are very angry." Mrs. Victoria felt like her world was falling apart. She grabbed her phone and saw the video. It had millions of views. People were writing terrible comments about her. "How did this happen?" she whispered. Back at the restaurant, Samuel was explaining everything to Grace. "I had security cameras outside the building. I posted the video online so people could see how cruel that woman was," Samuel said. "But sir, won't this cause problems for me?" Grace asked worriedly. Samuel shook his head. "Grace, you don't need to worry about anything anymore. I want to offer you a scholarship to study hotel management at the best university in Lagos. I will also pay you a good salary to work in one of my hotels while you study." Grace couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sir, why are you doing this for me?" "Because you have something that money can't buy, a good heart. You work hard, you're kind to everyone, and you never give up. These are the qualities I look for in people." Grace started crying, but this time they were happy tears. "What about my sister's school fees?" Grace asked. "Don't worry. I will pay for her education too. Both of you deserve a chance at a better life." 6 months later, Grace was studying at the university and working at Samuel's 5-star hotel. She was the best student in her class and everyone respected her. Mrs. Victoria's company had closed down. She lost her big house and expensive cars. She now worked as a saleswoman in a small shop, earning very little money. Every day she remembered how badly she had treated Grace and she felt ashamed. One evening, Mrs. Victoria was walking home from work when she saw Grace getting out of a nice car at the hotel. Grace was wearing a beautiful uniform and looked very professional. Mrs. Victoria recognized her immediately. This was the same girl she had splashed with mud. "Grace!" Mrs. Victoria called out quietly. Grace turned around and saw Mrs. Victoria. Instead of being angry, Grace walked over to her. "Hello, Mrs. Victoria. How are you?" Grace asked kindly. Mrs. Victoria started crying. Grace, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I was so cruel and stupid. Can you ever forgive me? Grace looked at Mrs. Victoria for a long moment. Then she smiled. I forgive you, Mrs. Victoria. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. Mrs. Victoria cried even harder. You're so kind. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Everyone deserves a second chance, Grace said. If you ever need help, just ask. As Grace walked into the hotel, Mrs. Victoria watched her go. She realized that Grace had something she had never had, true beauty that came from inside. 2 years later, Grace graduated at the top of her class. Samuel offered her a job as manager of his newest hotel. At the graduation ceremony, Samuel stood up to make a speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about a special young woman named Grace Okafor. 2 years ago, she was working as a cleaner. Someone treated her very badly, but she never lost her kindness or her hope. Today, she is about to become one of the youngest hotel managers in Lagos. Everyone clapped loudly. Grace walked up to receive her certificate, and Samuel whispered to her, I'm very proud of you. Thank you for believing in me, Grace whispered back. In the audience, Blessing watched her sister with tears of joy. Next to her sat Mrs. Victoria, who had asked permission to come. She clapped harder than anyone else. After the ceremony, Samuel took Grace aside. Grace, I have one more surprise for you, he said. What is it? Grace asked. Samuel smiled and got down on one knee. He pulled out a beautiful ring. Grace Okafor, will you marry me? Grace gasped. Over the past 2 years, she and Samuel had become very close friends. She had seen his kind heart and generous spirit. She had fallen in love with him not because he was rich, but because he was good. Yes, Grace said happily. Everyone cheered as Samuel put the ring on Grace's finger. A year later, Grace and Samuel had a beautiful wedding. Grace invited Mrs. Victoria, who had become a different person, humble and kind. Mrs. Victoria worked hard to rebuild her life and had learned to treat everyone with respect. At the wedding reception, Samuel stood up to make a toast. My friends, I want to tell you that sometimes the most beautiful diamonds are found in the mud. My wife Grace taught me that true wealth is not money or cars or big houses. True wealth is having a good heart and treating others with love. Grace smiled at her husband. She thought about that terrible day when Mrs. Victoria splashed mud on her. She never imagined that day would lead to so much happiness. Sometimes, when bad things happen to good people, it's just the beginning of something beautiful. Grace learned that being kind and working hard always pays off in the end. And Mrs. Victoria learned that how we treat others, especially those who have less than us, shows who we really are inside. The muddy water that was meant to humiliate Grace had actually washed away her old life and brought her a new one filled with love, success, and joy.